Dude, what's wrong, bro? There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west. Look at that thing, dude.
Want to take a ride?
Shall we play a game?
Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
From the Kingdom of Argenta, at the foothills of the Ouachita Mountains in the great American Southeast. Hey everyone, it's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. And this episode is going to be another tribute to Art Bell, the legend. A little over a year ago, I did a tribute to Art, basically soon after the first year anniversary of his passing had happened. And it ended up being a really popular show. I mean, I knew people might have some interest in it, but I mainly did it as a tribute to Art. And, while I was doing it, I found some interesting UFO articles and then some stuff that, was happening here in Arkansas. And it really generated a lot more interest than the usual episode. There's always a certain amount of interest in every episode of Shane Plays Geek Talk, but that one definitely got some interest. So I figured I would do it annually. I think I'd been kind of kicking that around anyway. So here we go with another one. And in the show notes for today's show, go to shaneplays.com, ShanePlays.com. And every news article I'm going to reference today will be listed there. We're going to talk a little bit of space news, interesting space news, but the vast majority of the show is going to be just really an explosion of UFO news. Not only from the typical, well, that's kind of weird, to, official sources talking about UFOs. And in the last Art Bell episode I did, there were a couple of news items talking about the Navy and, official sources saying, look, we have some UFO footage here. We're not sure what it is. And in the past year, the news has just exploded. So we're definitely going to get into that. I also want to tell you a little bit about, just Art Bell, if you're tuning in because you love Art Bell, like I do, if you didn't catch my first tribute episode, it's hard to put into words how much I enjoyed listening to Art Bell on the radio. And I know he touched a lot of other people. He covered all kinds of topics and he was always just frank and open. He didn't have call screeners and he would have these great conversations with anybody, no matter how loopy they seemed or how, professional or whatever. He talked to everybody the same. Well, I've been reading in the past few weeks, bought it a few months ago, started it, and have been reading it off and on. It's called The Art of Talk, and it's by Art Bell. It's an out-of-print book, and I bought it because The Art of Talk, it's going to be Art Bell talking about how to be a better talk show host. And that's a little bit of what it is, but what it really is this is Art, who's considered a very private person, just opening up on a lot of subjects. So I'll put a link in the show notes to this book. I mean, he starts from his parents to when he was born, to, his career in the Air Force, his career in radio, to his home life, his love of his wife, just so much stuff in here. And a couple of things that were very interesting that you'd probably never know about Art, if you didn't know, if he didn't tell you, was one, he had panic attacks a lot. Evidently, he even says in this book that he had panic attacks during the show sometimes, and he had to take breaks or whatever, or cover it up on the show. And in my opinion, he did a very good job of that. Another thing, and there's so much interesting stuff in here. It talks about how young he was when he got his ham radio license and why he likes ham radio and why he wanted to be a talk radio host and how all this stuff happened. I mean, there's a lot of really private stuff in here. His feelings on a wide range of political and social things. And he's just very upfront. He's like, this is what I believe and what I don't believe. And here's why. And in his own words, he doesn't suffer fools gladly, which that didn't come through on the air. He always treated his guests the same, but I guess in his off the air in his professional and personal life, he didn't treat fools gladly. But he, like I said, he had panic attacks and he, and just all this, his ham radio. And there's this really, the book's almost worth it for this epic battle that he got into with rabbits at his estate. I guess estate's the right word. His residence, his land in Pahrump, Nevada. He had this ongoing battle with these rabbits that were coming in and chewing up his garden hoses. And after the show, evidently he'd be out there, once the show was over, yelling and acting like a lunatic and throwing rabbits at him. And it's all these misadventures he went through trying to get that under control before a listener finally kind of gave him a tip that helped him out. But there's so much in this book. And if you really are interested in art as a person, I really recommend It's The Art of Talk. And it's by Art Bell, but he had somebody sat down with him, helped him write it. Let me see if I can find her name real quick. Editor, Jennifer L. Osborne. So, and the editor is almost a misnomer because she would sit down with him and it almost sounded like he would just talk to her and she would record it or type it up. And, so it was more than her just editing it. It sounded like, she had a really proactive role in getting this information out of Art. Anyway, okay, so moving on. We did lose Art on April 18th of 2018. So it's been a little over 2 years now. And even though he wasn't really on the air much the last couple of years of his life, I know that I miss him and many others do. But on to the news. Let's see. I've got a little bit of space news here, like I said. And then after that, it's just a ridiculous amount of UFO news. Almost an embarrassment of riches of UFO news. But here we go. So first kind of interesting space related news item I have here is from IFL Science, and it's marine plankton found on surface of International Space Station. Now, this has been a few months back, but I say a lot of times I see interesting news articles and I save them and, come back to them later. So this has actually been a few months since this one came out, but it said scientists examining samples taken from the exterior of the International Space Station, the ISS, of course, have made a rather unexpected discovery. Traces of marine plankton and other microbes growing on the surface of the illuminators. What's more, it seems like maybe they've been there for years. So the interesting thing here is the organisms are not native to where the launch site was that took that stuff to the space station. Okay, so I guess it's possible that, when you launch or whatever, maybe something could hitch a ride in some way if it can survive in outer space. But in this, they're like, that just, they're not native to where that part of the ISS was launched from. And they talk about, it isn't characteristics to Baikonur. I'm saying that wrong, I'm sure, referring to the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, where crew and cargo are launched for the ISS. Turns out there are some rising air currents which settle on the surface of the station. So their best guess is that you have plankton on the surface of the ocean, and their best theory is that rising air currents actually took these plankton somehow and got on the International Space Station. So, and then according to chief of the Russian ISS orbital mission, Vladimir Solovyev, I hope I'm saying that right, Solovyev, I don't know if he's the current orbital mission commander, but, or the Russian ISS orbital mission commander, but he was at this time. He said the surface of the ISS is heavily polluted due to engines from delivery spacecrafts and other factors. Crew members have therefore initiated a cleanup operation to put the illuminators in order. So there you go. Not even the ISS is safe from pollution, folks. And then I've got one person, I have no idea if this one person commenting on the article said, nope. Wife is NASA microbiologist. This is absolutely untrue. And it's like, well, okay. So I don't know if this person knows what they're talking about or not. But these days, people will argue over, you could literally, I saw on Facebook, somebody posted a picture of a stick and they said, there's so much arguing over Facebook. Here's something we won't argue over. Here's a picture of a stick. And I guarantee you, people will find a way to argue over a picture of a stick these days. It's just part of the current national zeitgeist. Not that I'm happy about it, but that's what it is. Now, next up, we have a story from Air and Space, and the byline is Dirk Schultz McCook. Hope I'm saying that right. A stellar mystery. How could 100 stars just vanish. That's right. You heard right. Vanish. So again, this is Air and Space magazines. All this stuff will be linked at shaneplays.com on the show notes. It says a comparison of old and new star catalogs shows that some objects seem to have gone missing. And it's not just a few. They're in the, I think, around 600. So an international research group led by Beatrice Velaro from the Nordic Institute for Theoretical Physics in Sweden and the Institute for Astrophysics on the Canary Islands reports something strange in the current issue of the Astronomical Journal, and this is from last December. They compared star maps from the 1950s with recent surveys and discovered that 100 previously cataloged stars cannot be found anymore. I guess it was 100, not 500 or 600. The group's project has been comparing map stars listed in the U.S. Naval Observatory Catalog, B1.0, dating from the 1950s, with those in another more recent catalog, the Pan-STARRS Data Release DR1. A total of 150,000 objects were found in the older catalog, which lists 600 million stars. So this says a total of 150,000 objects were found in the older catalog, which did not have readily identifiable counterpart in the new star survey, even though the Pan-STARRS data release includes stars that are 5 times less bright. So the newer catalog actually has stars that are less bright than the older data, but the older data shows more stars, or more light sources anyway. Of these 150,000 anomalies, so here's how we get 150,000 to 100, they visually inspected 24,000 of the 150,000 anomalies, which means the older data showed a star or a light source. The newer data didn't. They inspected 150,000 anomalies, they inspected 24,000 visually of those 150,000 and discovered that 100 of these point sources of light appear only in the older star survey. Since then, they've apparently just vanished. So there could be even more because, I know these numbers are kind of confusing. They notice comparing data between two different sky catalogs that the newer data, even though the newer data it shows more stars because it shows dimmer light sources, between the newer and the older sky catalogs, two different catalogs, there's 150,000 stars that appear in the old catalog that don't appear in the new one. They're like, So they visually inspected 24,000 of those differences, and they found out that out of that, really 100 of them really aren't in there. So I guess maybe they used computer, I'm just theorizing here, they used a computer algorithm to compare the two, saw some anomalies, and then went and visually inspected them. So 24,000 is about 1/6 of 150,000, if I'm doing that right, roughly. And they found 100. So there's probably more than 100 that have straight up vanished. So, there's, of course, they go on to talk about why maybe this is happening. And it goes anything from natural phenomena, such as extremely flaring dwarf planets, Feld supernova, or stars that might directly collapse into a black hole. But they're saying it seems to be, there's too many discrepancies, too much stuff missing to seem to be natural phenomena, which of course leads to, well, are they spaceships? Have they moved? Are they Dyson spheres? There's all these theories and things going on that people are shooting from the hip. Nobody knows. If they've moved, where did they move? If they disappeared, why did they disappear? What were they? Etc. So all we know right now is that we definitely have some missing points of light in the sky, which I certainly hope doesn't indicate that Galactus is real, because that would be a huge bummer. Although that would also mean that the Silver Surfer is real, which would be kind of cool, but I don't want my solar system or sun. I don't know. Galactus doesn't eat suns. He eats planets. Maybe he eats suns when he's bored. I don't know. But anyway, so next up, we've got, and this is kind of cool. This is from The Independent. Byline is Anthony Cuthbertson. And NASA releases peculiar recordings from surface of Mars. And what they have is they've gotten this thing on Mars. We've had them on Earth for a long time, We've had them on the moon, or had one on the moon for a while, but we now have a seismic experiment for interior structure, SEIS, to capture the sounds of vibrations and weather systems on the red planet. So it's a dome-shaped instrument. It sets on the surface of Mars, and it uses wind pressure, temperature, and magnetic sensors to assist the seismometer in detecting dust storms, meteorite impacts, Mars quakes, etc. And if you go to this, the link, if you go to the show notes at shaneplays.com, they actually have a video listed on the post that you can listen to these sounds yourself. But anyway, they go on to say that, a principal investigator at NASA, Philippe Lagnon, he says, we've been waiting for this moment for a long time. It's been 130 years since the first seismic record on Earth, and almost 50 years since a seismometer was placed on the moon during the Apollo program. What we learned from SEIS will shed light on how Mars formed and evolved. So they get the noises they expect, but they're also starting to get noises that they say are peculiar. So, and by the way, the SEIS instrument belongs to NASA's InSight robotic lander, which landed on Mars November of 2018. So, but anyway, so they're getting some peculiar sounds that they've nicknamed dinks and donks. And they're theorizing that they might actually be coming from parts within the seismometer itself, which expands and contracts when it heats up and cools down. But that's not definitely, what's going on. All they know is that they have strange sounds that at the current time they can't identify. I'm sure some people will imaginatively assume that there's an underground civilization on Mars that's about to launch a bunch of cylinders at us and slimy things will come out in tripods. But we'll just have to wait and see. They've also, detected things that they would have expected, such as on May 22nd and July 25th, they captured Mars quakes that had magnitudes of 3.7 and 3.3. So it sounds like maybe Mars has the same Richter scale as Earth. And then Konstantin Charalambos, an InSight science team member at the Imperial College in London, said it's been exciting, especially in the beginning, hearing the first vibrations from the lander. He says, you're imagining what's really happening on Mars as InSight sits on the open landscape. That is pretty cool. I love all the stuff they're doing on Mars. Those little probes, those cute little rovers out there working hard, zooming around, doing the hard work, doing the dangerous work. My goodness. Gets the vitals excited just thinking about those crazy little rovers. Okay, speaking of that, last thing we don't want to forget, we have launched a new rover to Mars just recently, I think July 30th. And I'm recording this on August 6th. So this is from CNN, Mars launch. NASA sends Perseverance rover to space, and the byline is Ashley Strickland. So the Perseverance rover and its Ingenuity helicopter. How cool is that? We're sending a helicopter to Mars. So now not only are we going to have cute little rovers, we're going to have cute little helicopters just all over Mars, doing crazy stuff, poking the dirt, listening to dinks and donks, measuring things, inspiring millions, no, dare I say billions, with all the cool stuff that NASA and all these other agencies are doing. So the spacecraft carrying the rover and helicopter successfully launched to Mars Thursday morning aboard a United Launch Alliance Atlas V541 rocket from Cape Canaveral, Florida, at 7:50 a.m. Eastern Time, which is super cool. And the team in the control center at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory confirmed they received the spacecraft signal shortly after 9 a.m. Eastern Time. So a little an hour later, they got a signal confirmed. That sucker's out there in space, headed to Mars. And this is pretty neat. We have a deep space network. So here's a quote from Omar Bays, the launch manager at NASA's Launch Services Program. This signifies that JPL's deep space network has locked onto the spacecraft, which is on its journey to Mars. So they've got all these ground stations on our deep space network, and this deep space network is a network that we have to, as you would think, to communicate with spacecraft or automated probes or whatever that are in deep space, such as the Voyager spacecraft. Yeah, it says here, the Deep Space Network is designed to communicate with spacecraft that are a great distance from Earth, even like the Voyager probes, which are currently tens of billions of miles away. And as the spacecraft, this is weird, I don't quite get this, but As the spacecraft get further away from Earth, the reception at the radio signals at the ground stations improves. So I'm not sure why that is. Let's see what it says here. Perseverance Twitter account managed by NASA's social team shared, "I am healthy and on my way to Mars, but may be too loud for the antennas on Earth while I'm so close. Ground stations are working to match my signal strength so that I can communicate clearly with my team." So evidently these ground stations, these deep space networks, are so finely tuned that if it signals too loud, if it's too close to Earth, they have a hard time with it. But if it's way out there, then they have a better chance of picking it up. So, yeah, here we go. So after traveling through space for about 7 months, Perseverance is scheduled to land at Jezero Crater on Mars on February 18, 2021. So it took a decade of hard work, and they had to get through the coronavirus stuff and all of that to get this thing launched up. And it says here, Ingenuity will be the first helicopter to fly on Mars. It's just exciting. It says it's the 9th mission to land on the red planet and its 5th rover. Perseverance's design and new capabilities build on lessons learned from previous rovers. This rover is designed to act as an astrobiologist studying an intriguing site on Mars for signs of ancient life. It's got a second brain to help it land, because where it's landing has hazards and obstacles, but a second brain is going to help it. And it's going to use new scientific instruments to explore Jezero Crater, the site of an ancient lake and river delta on Mars. The lake existed between 3.5 billion and 4 billion years ago when Mars was wetter, warmer, and habitable. Not sure what I don't know. Okay, so Ingenuity, the first helicopter on Mars, will fly. Yeah, the first helicopter will fly on another planet, conduct as many as 5 test flights in the thin Martian atmosphere. If successful, this lightweight technology demonstration could lead to similar designs that are deployed as scouts on future missions. And its Perseverance promises to be an exciting 2-year mission that will provide new perspectives on Mars. The rover has 23 cameras, some of which will be active during its harrowing entry, descent, and landing. The rover will also be able to hear Mars, hear in quotes, for the first time, and is carrying 2 microphones to share the sounds of the red planet, and even itself as the rover's wheels crunch across the rocky surface. Now, that's different from the seismometer. That's picking up other vibrations and things. This would actually be more like audio, like real audio, like you would hear with your own ear on Mars. That's it for the space news. I thought those were some kind of cool articles, and we are going to roll on up on some really crazy UFO news now. I want to remind everybody real quick that there's a lot of different ways to keep up with Shane Plays Geek Talk. One way, of course, is at the website on the blog at Shane Plays, ShanePlays.com. I post all kinds of different stuff there, including the podcast whenever a new episode goes out. Speaking of, the last podcast is on the blog and out there in the blogosphere and other ways. And that was episode 224. And that was Mythological Figures and Maleficent Monsters for 5e, 5th edition D&D, with Russ Morrissey and Mike Myler. And that was a really fun episode. That's such a cool book that they put together. But yeah, the podcast goes out on the blog, on iTunes, Google Play Music. I just got some kind of update from Google that they're changing their service. So Google Play Music, I'll still have it out there on Google, but it sounds like I'm going to have to change exactly how it goes out via Google. It's on Stitcher, Podbean, YouTube, and more. And last but never least, we're also carried on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is SciFi for your Wi-Fi, kryptonradio.com. We do have a Patreon for Shane Plays. You just go to patreon.com/Shane Plays. Another great way to support the show is if you follow the Twitter at Shane Plays, ShanePlays, or if you log into my Discord channel, then I'm constantly posting stuff from Humble Bundle that it's affiliate links. So everybody wins. You get super cheap, cool stuff. Charities get supported, and I get a little bit of a percentage of that through the affiliate links, and it's really helpful. So, if you don't want to do Patreon or you can't do Patreon, maybe consider keeping up with me on Twitter at Shane Plays. And you can also I have 2 Twitters. One is just Shane Plays. The other one is Shane Plays PR. And if you want just the announcements and the main stuff, follow Shane Plays PR. If you want everything, all of my chatter on Twitter, which not everybody wants, I get that, then follow Shane Plays. But there's all kinds of cool stuff on the Humble Bundle. Right now, I mean, there is a Double Fine Games bundle. There's programming languages by O'Reilly. There's a JavaScript, Learn JavaScript bundle. There's a Create Comics and Manga. And there's Star Trek Adventures RPG by Modifius, a Raspberry Pi bundle. There's just all kinds of cool stuff. So those are just two ways between Patreon and, keeping up with me and checking out those Humble Bundle links that you can help out the show. And any support is appreciated, even if it's just you sharing it out or leaving a positive review for me on wherever you found it. But anyway, I just love to have you here. Thanks for coming along on a journey into the things we love. And now back to the news. All right, we have a few news items regarding UFOs in general. And then after that, we're going to have more of this really surprising, almost mind-boggling, the Navy and the Pentagon and all that, talking officially about UFOs. First, though, I've got an article here about Kurt Russell, actually. This is pretty interesting, in my opinion. Now, this article is actually from 3 years ago. I see stuff pop up sometimes, and I'm like, I really want to talk about that. So I grabbed it, and evidently when Kurt Russell was doing promotion for Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which he was in, it came out that, do you remember? You probably do. If you're into UFOs, you probably remember this. But in 1997, which was over 20 years ago, there was this famous Phoenix Lights incident, which is one of the most famous and documented UFO experiences, moments, whatever, in history, because a lot of people saw it happening, and a lot of people took videos and photos, and I'm sure if it happened today, even more would happen, because everyone's got their phones with videos or cameras, video cameras and stuff on it now. But anyway, it was well documented, one of the most famous incidents in the annals of UFO history, if you will. Well, evidently Kurt Russell, who's a pilot, was flying that night with his son over Phoenix. And when this is what he had to say about it. He said, I was flying, and it says in brackets, his son Oliver, to go see his girlfriend. And we were on approach. I saw 6 lights over the airport in absolute uniform in a V shape. Oliver said to me, I was just looking at him. I was coming in. We're maybe half a mile out. And Oliver said, "Pa, what are those lights?" Then I kind of came out of my reverie, and I said, I don't know what they are. And he said, "Are we okay here?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to call it in." And he reported it. And then honestly, according to this article, he kind of forgot about it. And then years later, his wife Goldie Hawn was watching a special about the Phoenix Lights on TV, and he realized, oh, that was a big deal. I want to give credit, by the way, to MovieWeb, and the byline is Ryan Scott for this article. So just, really interesting stuff. And it also mentions here, I didn't know about this. I'm going to track it down. But Ridley Scott, a few years back, about 3 years ago, because it's talking in this article like it's about to come out, made a movie called Phoenix Forgotten. It was produced by Ridley Scott, not directed. And it's talking about the Phoenix Lights phenomenons and, a lot of, UFO movies, and there's sort of a subgenre of found footage horror movies that deal with UFOs, and, the Phoenix Lights stuff, comes up a lot. So there you go. Kurt Russell. The headline on here is Kurt Russell is the pilot who reported Phoenix Lights UFO sighting. We don't know if he was the first person to report it, but he did report it, not realizing, the significance or the magnitude of what he was about or what he was reporting. He just kind of went on with this thing. Now, these next 4 news items are all from Bro Bible, but they're, and Bro Bible is not a UFO magazine by any means, but their stuff pops up in my feed fairly often. So they do cover it among many other things. So the first one here is it says, and this is ironic if you think about it, because this was 6 months ago. So it was late 2019, early 2020. It says fleet of UFOs hovering over Arizona captured on video. And of course, Phoenix is in Arizona. Now this is a different incident, but it said a video has emerged. Oh, and it's by Paul Saka. So it's Bro Bible, and the byline is Paul Saka. But a video has emerged showing 6 bright lights hovering in the skies over Yuma, Arizona. The fleet of UFOs seems to be in a tight formation and suspended in midair, not moving or falling. The UFO footage was posted by YouTube channel Will Ease and publicized by ufologist Scott C. Waring's ET database. It shows there's a video here. Again, go to shaneplays.com to the show notes. All these articles will be linked. And there's a video here. It shows the glowing lights go from 6 to 3 and then assemble in a triangle formation. Then one by one, they disappear. You know, people are like, oh, those are UFOs. Another possibility is that they were taken because it was taken near the Marine Corps Air Station in Yuma. The light seen hovering in the sky may have been the Air Force dropping flares, but they stay motionless in the sky for a good amount of time. Then it's suddenly a triangle formation, which triangle formations evidently are fairly common for UFO hunters. So, you know, and the interesting thing here is whether it was the Air Force dropping flares or whether it was aliens, they're still UFOs. I mean, people forget a UFO just means that it's an unidentified flying object. Now, you know, we in our mind immediately go aliens. You know, I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. But it, you know, UFOs don't necessarily have to be, you know, aliens. I believe personally, not all, but I believe that some of the UFO sightings out there are experimental aircraft. Which used to be, I would probably say it was always the military, but now there's more and more, you know, civilian agencies getting in on stuff. So anyway, there was another, and this post itself, it's, you know, it's like, oh, there's stuff in Arizona, but then it goes on to, as the article progresses, it mentions other things. There's a video of UFO sightings from tourists in the Mojave Desert. You got a triangle formation. Then one by one, they vanish. 2013, there was a UFO sighting in Rapid City, South Dakota. They had 3 bright lights in triangle formation. Last October, there was a triangle-shaped UFO spotted in Texas. And it just goes on and on. It says in August 2019, there were multiple sightings of a black triangular-shaped UFO over the skies over the Portland area. The aircraft was seen near the Portland Air National Guard base, which prompted many conspiracy theories. It wasn't an alien spaceship, but a military spy plane. And many conspiracy theorists believe the triangle ship is the TR-3B, a long-rumored top-secret United States Air Force spy plane. The TR-3 Black Manta is said to be a surveillance plane that is alleged to be a USAF, United States Air Force, Black Project. And then also, earlier this month, like I said, this post just keeps going with all this stuff. A Colombian commercial airlines pilot by the name of Cesar posted a video of an unidentified flying object high in the atmosphere. While flying over Medellin in the Viva Air Airbus A320S, Cesar captured video of a metallic cube floating in the air. The UFO didn't have a balloon, wings, propellers, or exhaust. And then it goes on to finish, said there is a massive rise, and that's kind of one of the themes of today's podcast. There's a massive rise in the number of UFO sightings in North America in 2019. The National UFO Reporting Center, which tracks calls and messages from people around the U.S. and Canada, this is just North America, about unexplained objects in the sky, said that it had received 5,971 sightings in 2019. That's a considerable jump from 2018 when there were 3,395 UFO sightings. That's almost double. Not quite, but almost double in 1 year over another. And the state with the most UFO sightings in 2019 was California with 485, followed by Florida with 385. Washington State had 222 reports of UFOs last year. So there's your top 3 states that have UFO sightings. Going on, continuing on, this is also from the Bro Bible and also from Paul Saka. Really do, folks, go to the show notes, shaneplays.com. Go to these articles, because these articles have all kinds of videos attached. They're really interesting. So I would really, if you're interested in this, go check out the videos, because, that's going to give a whole different dimension on what you're understanding of, of the situation. Now, 11 months ago, Bro Bible posted that an alien hunter spotted a UFO flying near erupting volcano in live cam video. And again, this is Paul Saka. And an alien hunter discovered an unidentified flying object crossing over the top of an erupting volcano when watching live camera footage. Footage from the active, and I'm going to get this wrong, Popocatépetl volcano in Mexico appears to show a UFO gliding over a plume of smoke. So what's interesting about this is, there's a UFO sighting here on August 19th, and it's on video, but and this volcano, by the way, erupts every 10 to 12 hours. I guess that's why there's so much video being taken of it. But there's several videos listed on this article, and it goes on to recount over the years, back in 2010, back in 2013, back in 2014, 2014 again, 2015. It's a series of UFOs that appear to be spotted around this volcano, and they're all on video listed. So it's not just one UFO sighting. It's an ongoing series of UFO sightings, and each UFO appears to be different. It's not that they don't have all the same characteristics. You might get a dark cigar UFO. You might get a boomerang shaped glowing UFO. You might just get a blob, something flying you can't make out. You had glowing orbs in a triangular formation. So this article is interesting to me from the perspective of, a lot of people are like, well, if we had an area that we see UFOs a lot, we could study them more. Well, here you go. This volcano, for whatever reason, appears to attract a lot of UFOs if this footage and these ufologists, UFO hunters are to be believed. All right. These next two articles are connected, and there's actually a third article that connects into this, but for the purposes of time, I'm not going to go over it. But it's the same person at the Bro Bible, and it is Douglas Charles is the byline. And the first article is UFO expert claims ISS video is 100% proof that NASA and Russia know aliens visit the space station. And so that would have been like last November. Now there's another article from 4 months ago where purportedly more UFOs were being seen at the ISS. And so this one from 4 months ago, the headline is UFO spotted on NASA live stream video outside the International Space Station is absolutely real. And keep in mind, these articles are two separate incidents. And when you read through this second article, it gives you this recap that it happened back in November, and when what one expert called 100% proof, and that's the first article I mentioned, that a UFO visited the ISS. Then the second article says it occurred again in February. I don't even have that article linked. I'm just pointing out that, it's more than just these two articles. It occurred again in February with the person in the video sounding dismayed and unprepared for its sudden appearance. And now in April, so 4 months ago, we have yet another NASA video from the ISS. In which UFO and alien expert Scott Waring says on his website while discussing the footage, the UFO looks like a classic disc design. The metallic glint is unmistakable. So let's go back to this first appearance. And what it is people are camping out and watching these live feeds from the International Space Station. And in this one from 9 months ago, last November, there's a Russian astronaut, a cosmonaut, if you will, is outside doing some work. And suddenly, you can watch the videos on this article. Suddenly, just like a couple of UFOs just appear out of nowhere. And so the article claims that they were cloaked. Or maybe it's one big ship and the cloaking isn't working super well. So a couple of places on the ship are exposed. But either way, the cosmonaut is talking with somebody on the ground at NASA, and evidently, this article goes in and says that they're kind of talking around it, kind of in code, saying, we see something up there with you, and he's like, da da da, and then the minute he says a ship, the person at NASA kind of overrides him, cuts in, and starts saying a lot of stuff, in which people say that they're, kind of talking around the situation. So, but if you watch the video, I mean, it could be doctored, it could be CGI or whatever. It does look like, if you take it at face value, that guy's hanging out all of a sudden, UFOs out there with him. And, he tries to mention it, and he gets, as they say, says on the article, it says this conversation recorded from the NASA live cam is 100% proof that NASA knows about alien craft. I don't know about that. A lot of times there's 100% proof. Well, I don't know if it's 100% proof, but it says alien craft buzzing passing around the space station. When the astronaut aboard the ISS said a ship, the NASA ground control cut him off and said, copy all, before he could finish what he was saying. She already saw it on live cam at ground control. She reacted fast before he could talk about it too much. And then she starts kind of saying, have you finished what you're doing? Is there anything else you've done that could have, it almost sounded like she was saying, is there anything you did that would have attracted attention? And eventually it says it goes to red screen with no cam. So there you go. Now jumping 9 months ahead to the second article from April, what happened here is there was somebody, and remember there's an incident in the middle in February, with the person in the video sounding dismayed and unprepared for a sudden appearance. I haven't checked that one out yet. But in this other article I have here that's 9 months later from the first one, again, Scott Waring, who seems to pop up a lot, he said, oh, it looks like a classic disc design. The metallic glint is unmistakable. And what's happening here, instead of a UFO being up close to the ISS, you see a part of the ISS, and then below it you see the curve of the Earth. And in the clouds, you see like a metallic glint, and there's they zoom in on it and all of that. So, Scott Waring is theorizing that, this UFO was so faint and small that he thinks that they missed it. And he's like, most of NASA's at home on lockdown, probably fooling around instead of doing real work. So he was able to see this. So, here's a couple of articles that link to yet other articles that claim to have video evidence that not only are UFOs visiting the ISS, but the astronauts in ground control know about it, and we'll try to prevent public confirmation via these live streams. Coming up next, got several articles. It's just mind-blowing, really. I'm surprised. I guess people are so busy right now that, the import isn't really breaking through the background noise to the public in general, that, basically government agencies are admitting that UFOs exist up to where they are sharing video. Last episode I did of this like a year ago, we touched on that a little bit, and we've got several more articles of that now. Okay, to kick things off, we actually have an article that ties in to what I talked about on the last Art Bell UFO tribute show, but this came out September 17th of 2019, which was after that episode. So it kind of adds more credence, officialness, whatever you want to call it, officiality to some of those stories. So this is from Fox News. Byline is Chris Sciaccia, and it's again from September 17th. And the headline is UFO videos are footage of real unidentified objects, U.S. Navy acknowledges. Now, we already knew that. However, there's a little bit more information in here that I didn't really catch last time. And I'm sure the information was out there, but it just didn't really catch my attention. One of the people pushing these efforts, like leaking videos and pushing for truth and that sort of thing, is Tom Delange, or Delange, who is the former Blink 182 singer from the band Blink 182, which, that's really kind of interesting to me. And he has this To the Stars Science Foundation thing we'll talk about more in a little bit, but it keeps coming up. His name, his foundation, and this guy that's working with him come up a lot. So in June of 2019, which also follows my last episode, which was at the end of May, former Senator Harry Reid, a Democrat from Nevada, he's now retired, but he expressed his desire for lawmakers to hold public hearings into what the military knows. And this is going to come up again in some other articles. He said they would be surprised how the American public would accept it. He said during a wide-ranging interview with a Nevada radio station, people from their individual states would accept it. And then it gives the recap of there's three main videos. One is called FLIR1. Let's call it Flyer 1, Gimbal and Go Fast. These are the three videos that Navy pilots have recorded, I believe in 2004 and then again in like 2014 or 2015. These three videos are really what are pushing all of this US UFO, or I think UAP is now the official boring military designation, unidentified aerial phenomena. But UFOs, these three videos are really pushing a lot of the discussion and official recognition and that sort of thing. And they're recorded from the flight cameras and the sensors of Navy fighter pilot planes. So, and then Joe Greenwald Jr., and this person publishes The Black Vault, told Motherboard that he was really surprised at the language the Navy used in its statement. And he said, I very much expected that when the U.S. military addressed the videos, they would coincide with language we see on official documents that have now been released, and they would label them as quote-unquote drones or balloons. However, they did not. They went on record stating the phenomena depicted in those videos is unidentified, again in quotes. That really made me surprised, intrigued, excited, and motivated to push harder for the truth. Okay, so... and pay attention to this name, because this name comes up a lot. Luis Elizondo, who was the former head of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AATIP. And that program, quote, has supposedly gone away, but is still going just under a different name. And we'll talk about that more here in a little bit. And he said people should pay attention to the comments the government is making about UFOs. And this person is working... Not only did he used to be the head of the Pentagon's department that was investigating UFOs, but he's now working for that organization that the lead singer of Blink-182 is using to push for the truth about UFOs. So there's some names you're going to see that keep coming up here. But he said, pay attention to the comments the government is making about UFOs. What the pilots encountered that day was able to perform in ways that defied all logic and our current understanding of aerodynamics. And he wrote that in a Fox News op-ed referring to the 2004 encounter. Earlier this year, and we covered this last episode, the Navy did issue new classified guidelines on how to report such instances in response to unknown advanced aircraft flying into or near Navy strike groups or other sensitive military facilities and formations. The Defense Department also briefed Senate Intelligence Committee Vice Chairman Mark Warner from Virginia in June, along with two other senators, as part of what appears to be heightened efforts to inform politicians about naval encounters with unidentified aircraft. So what you have to realize here, I mean, with this much noise, this much commenting, this much official government discussion, even in public, maybe not sharing the details of what's being discussed, but sharing at all that they're being discussed. I mean, this is preparing. I don't know what the announcement will be. I don't know what the agenda is. I don't know if they're going to announce extraterrestrials, but this kind of thing happens when you start getting ready to be much more open about things. So don't be surprised when that happens. Well, the last thing that's kind of an interest on this Fox News article is President Trump said, and there will be another remark later in the show from President Trump, but President Trump said he has been briefed on the Navy pilots' reported sightings of unidentified flying objects, but remains skeptical of the existence of UFOs. I want them to think whatever they think, Trump told ABC News' George Stephanopoulos early this year, referring to the Navy pilots. I did have one very brief meeting on it, but people are saying they're seeing UFOs. Do I believe it? Not particularly. So as of September, that's what Trump was saying in public about the UFO stuff. So, okay, next up is a article in, believe it or not, the Business Insider. And this is from this April, so just a few months ago. And the byline is Area Bendix. So the Pentagon just released a video of a Tic Tac shaped UFO The Navy pilot who recorded it says he doesn't want to be associated with the aliens. So there's a few different things going on here. One, we already know about the Tic Tac video. That was the 2004 video that's been making the rounds for a while now. It's called the Tic Tac video, at least unofficially, because Navy pilot Chad Underwood, who recorded the video from his plane, he described it as a Tic Tac, and he recorded the object using an infrared camera after his commanding officer, David Fravor, spotted the unusual shape during a flight training exercise. So I'm not going to go too much into detail on this actual instance. This has been out for a while. It's one of the videos of that trifecta of videos, if you will, that's so important right now. So in a December interview, so last December in New York Magazine, he kind of opened up about what it was like to actually record the video after being quiet about it for, pretty much 15 years. So he's being very clear. He says, at no point did I want to speculate as to what I thought this thing was, or to be associated with, alien beings in quotes and alien aircraft in quotes and all that stuff. It is just what we call a UFO. I couldn't identify it. It was flying and it was an object. It was as simple as that. So actually a few days earlier, a guided missile cruiser called the USS Princeton had been tracking about 8 to 10 mysterious objects flying near the Catalina and San Clemente Islands in California. And his boss had said, hey, this is the Dave Fravor that was mentioned earlier, said, hey, man, be on the lookout, be on the lookout for just something weird. Didn't know exactly what. But they were out flying that day, supposed to be, a pretty routine patrol flight, if you will. And they got a weird blip on the radar, and which was solid white smooth, an elongated egg. And Underwood was the one who coined the name Tic Tac. Now, these videos are really interesting. You should go watch them, because even if there's not a UFO, and I'm not saying it's aliens, I have no idea, but even if there's not something on there that's unexplained, looking at all the data and how they, record stuff and the heads up, I don't know if it's a heads up display, but it's got all the little data around the video showing, I'm in white mode or black mode. I'm in infrared, or I'm in, regular. And it's all this, I'm at this pitch, this angle, this velocity, this, altitude. It's really interesting. So you might want to check out that, take a look at least one of them. I think just as a geek, as a user interface geek, I think these things are pretty cool. So towards the end of this article, when it's discussing that unidentified doesn't necessarily mean extraterrestrial, Seth Shostak, a senior astronomer at the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute, basically SETI, previously told Business Insider that about 10% of UFO sightings didn't have explanations. So, the obvious corollary is that 90% do. And this, I don't know where he's getting his, math from, or what he's basing his assumptions from. But he said alien civilizations would know about our existence only if they're within about 35 light years of Earth. If they're more than 35 light years away, there hasn't been enough time for our signals to get to them and for them to decide, well, this is worth the money to go down there and fly around. And he says the really good evidence that we're being visited still has failed to surface. And then it goes on to, and the reason I kind of don't like that quote from him, because that's assuming a lot, that the technology and the way that any potential extraterrestrials would make decisions would be based on the lens and of how we decide things and the kind of technology we have. So I don't really buy into that. Assuming, I don't know if there's aliens or not, but assuming that there are, I don't buy into that as a good explanation. So, and then some people have gone on to say that glitches in the infrared camera may have been playing tricks on the pilot's eye. And he says that kind of sucks because I can't confirm that the object aggressively accelerated that way, but I have my feelings based off of my experience with my equipment and also just logic when it comes to, physics. He also dismissed the possibility that the UFO was part of covert tests done by NASA or the military. He said he had enough, he hadn't been told to be silent about anything, and he had enough clearance to know about that kind of stuff. Okay. And here we go. UFO lobbyists are trying to get the truth from Congress, and they're winning. And this is one of the articles when I said pay attention because you're going to hear some names again. So this is in Motherboard, And the byline is MJ Banias. But it says UFO lobbyists are trying to get the truth from Congress, and they're winning. There's been an explosion of UFO lobbyists in D.C., which I guess if you go from none to like 2 or 3, that's an explosion. But there are actually lobbyists and people who are not officially registered as lobbyists working Capitol Hill, working D.C., if you will, to get the truth on to get the government to disclose the truth. And ultimately, there's this term that's just disclosure. And that means they come out with full truth and details on extraterrestrials and UFOs. And that's the ultimate end game here. But anyway, so Stephen Bassett, for many years, was Capitol Hill's lone UFO lobbyist. He became a registered lobbyist in 1996 and set up an advocacy organization, the Paradigm Resource Group, or PRG, which has the goal of using all means possible to confront the United States government, recording its policy of a truth embargo on the events and evidence demonstrating an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race and the formal acknowledgement of that presence. And Bassett goes on to say it's not even about UFOs. The term is a product of government propaganda in service to the truth embargo and is no longer of value. It's about extraterrestrials and the disclosure process. Bassett goes on to claim that a significant percentage of all people on Capitol Hill are convinced there is an ET presence. They're just not able to speak to it publicly. So, and then PRG, his organization, has recently hired Teresa Tyndall, another registered lobbyist who is now also fighting for greater transparency about UFOs. She believes that the government is complicit in a massive cover-up. So this isn't just people, off in their living rooms, screaming about you. These are people actually working with the process up on Capitol Hill trying to get disclosure. And then Tyndall says the cat's out of the bag and politicians will be looking to control the issue. It is, after all, the most powerful political initiative as it affects absolutely every aspect of life. Polls show most people believe in ET life. I don't know if it, I got to be honest, I don't know if the extraterrestrial or UFO question is the most powerful political initiative because it affects absolutely every aspect of life. I'd have to think about that. But she's obviously fired up about it. Now, remember this name. It came up earlier. Luis Elizondo, a former intelligence officer. He was over the Pentagon's program, and he now works for the organization To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, which was founded by former Blink-182 lead singer Tom Delange. And then Elizondo has also appeared on the History Channel's UFO hunting show, Unidentified, Inside America's UFO Investigation. But anyway, back up to what Luis is saying. Luis Elizondo, he's like, look, he's working Capitol Hill too. He's not a registered lobbyist, but he's working with government officials and that sort of stuff on trying to get some clarity and information on what the government knows. And that's also a goal of the Two Stars Academy that we just mentioned. But Luis says at no time do we or have we mentioned extraterrestrials. We are simply ensuring our government does not fall victim to strategic surprise by the technology being displayed by UAP. Remember, the official term now, if you're in the government or talking to the government or whatever, is unknown aerial phenomenon, which is basically the same thing as saying unidentified flying object. But I guess you're not even admitting it's an object, it's just a phenomenon. So remember, and this guy used to be over the government program that was researching all this stuff. But he says, whether it be from Russia, China, allies, or little green men, our efforts focus on the national security and technology aspect, not or ET. He goes on to say, we simply don't know at this point if non-human technology is even part of the equation. So, and then talking a little bit about Tom Delange, To the Stars founder, previous singer of Blink-182. He's made his personal beliefs clear on the issue. In his book, Secret Machines, and secret is spelled S-E-K-R-E-T, Secret Machines, Gods, co-written with Peter Levenda, Delange sums it up by arguing that humanity was visited by I'm sorry, I'm not trying to mock this, it's just funny the way he puts it. Arguing that humanity was visited by aliens in its distant past, and that all human culture is one big cargo cult. So everything that we do is trying to emulate the alien culture and bring them back, if you understand the cargo cults. So the To the Stars Academy, and this is Bassett, the original the first registered UFO lobbyist that was mentioned at the beginning of the article. At any time that you have similar groups, but with different ways of doing things, you'll have some sniping back and forth. But he goes on to say, the To the Stars Academy and Arts and Science team are operating under certain conditions laid down by those still inside who are providing cover. So that's basically saying, yeah, they're making some progress, but at the same time, they're kind of playing by their rules and using their terminology, and they're only going to share so much stuff. So no classified content released, non-disclosure agreements must be honored, do not talk extraterrestrial. Why is that? There are factions inside and this is in brackets, military-industrial complex opposed to the Stars Academy project and would stop it if they could. Therefore, restraint is required for now. And then TV personality and UFO researcher Chase Klotsky also works in Washington as a lobbyist meeting with lawmakers about the phenomenon. The issue all of the lobbyists face, Klotsky explains, is that UFOs are considered sensitive information. And he goes on to say that, any discussion in D.C. about UAPs, you need a security clearance, very sensitive, etc. And then Klotsky is convinced, convinced that To the Stars is a key player in all this, and the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program is still in play. It is still in play, but it's under a different name now. So we'll get to that again here in a minute. I realized years ago that any kind of disclosure or confirmation will only be official if it comes from DC, and officials in quotes. I do this because of the evidence and facts that we can now present to start the process of public information, Klotsky said. We have unknown objects in our skies, confirmed. The question now, and the only questions right now, are what are these objects and who are the pilots controlling them? All right, moving right along. Here we have an article from the New York Times. This is from July 23rd. This just fairly recently. And the byline is Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Keene. Anyway, the headline is No Longer in Shadows, Pentagon's UFO unit will make some findings public. And the sort of subheadline is for over a decade, the program now tucked inside the Office of Naval Intelligence has discussed mysterious events in classified briefings. So this may sound on the surface like more of the same, but there's actually some news here. So despite Pentagon statements that it disbanded a once covert program to investigate unidentified flying objects, the effort remains underway, renamed and tucked inside the Office of Naval Intelligence, where officials continue to study mystifying encounters between military pilots and unidentified aerial vehicles, or UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Pentagon officials will not discuss the program, but it appeared last month, which would be June, in a Senate committee report outlining spending on the nation's intelligence agencies for the coming year. The program, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, so they've changed it. The other one was like UATTP, whatever. Well, now it's UAPT, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Task Force, was to standardize collection and recording on sightings of unexplained aerial vehicles. And here's the really interesting thing. Within the next 180 days after passage of the Intelligence Authorization Act, they're supposed to report at least some of their findings to the public. And I read in another article, I think we'll touch on that too, that they're supposed to actually report every 6 months, which is every 180 days. While retired officials involved with the effort, including, and here we go again, Harry Reid, the former Senate Majority Leader, hope the program will seek evidence of vehicles from other worlds. Its main focus is on discovering whether another nation, especially any potential adversary, is using breakout aviation technology. And to touch on that, Senator Marco Rubio from Florida, he's the acting chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, and he said that he's primarily concerned about reports of unidentified aircraft over American military bases, and it's in our best interest to find out who's responsible. So he's not as worried about ET or aliens or time travelers or whatever. He's more worried about like China or Russia or some other country having made a technological leap that allows them to conduct this sort of activity, which basically they would be able to fly circles around us, which is a huge advantage if you go to war or just for spying or whatever. He said, look, maybe there's a completely sort of boring explanation for it, but we need to find out. So he's kind of like where I'm at on it. Like, I think there's stuff out there. I want to know what it is, but it could end up being a mundane or boring explanation. I don't think it will, but it's possible. We really just don't know yet. Now, the predecessor unit, which supposedly closed down but which we have found out now was just renamed, was the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP. At that time, it was $22 million a year, and supposedly that had lapsed in 2012. People working with the program, however, said it was still in operation in 2017 and beyond. The program was begun in 2007 under the Defense Intelligence Agency. And that was the agency when it was named that, because this article goes on to touch on this. The Pentagon program's previous director, Luis Elizondo, there's that name again. He used to be over this program for the Pentagon, for the military, for the government, Defense Intelligence Agency, whatever. And now he works for the lead singer, the previous lead singer of Blink-182 of all people, for this organization that's trying to get information out of the government, official acknowledgments of UFOs. So anyway, he confirmed, he resigned in October 2017 after 10 years with the program, and confirmed that the new task force evolved from the Advanced Aerospace Program. And there's nothing unusual about that. The government, politicians, big organizations, whatever, they play games like that all the time. They're like, no, we closed it down. Well, okay, yeah, they closed it down. They just changed the name. But there's another similar, either an exact or very similar organization working under a different name, basically doing the same work. But Elizondo did go on to say it no longer has to hide in the shadows. It'll have a new transparency. So he is among a small group of former government officials and scientists with security clearances who, without presenting physical proof, say they are convinced that objects of undetermined origin have crashed on Earth with materials retrieved for study. Again, back to Senator Reid, the former Democratic senator from Nevada, who pushed for funding in the earlier UFO program when he was a majority leader. He said he believes that crashes of objects of unknown origin may have occurred and that retrieved materials should be studied. So like Senator Rubio was like, well, we don't know what the explanation is, but we need to find out what it is, even if it's a boring one. Senator Reid, former Senator Reid, is saying, no, I think crashes of some of the stuff has crashed. I think there's a good chance that we may have retrieved some of those materials. He went on to say, after looking into this, I came to the conclusion that the reports, some were substantive, some not so substantive. There were actual materials that the government and the private sector had in their possession, he said during an interview. So no crash artifacts have been publicly produced for independent verification. Some retrieved objects, such as unusual metallic fragments, were later identified from laboratory studies as man-made. So think about that, like if a stealth bomber crashed and you didn't know what one was, you might think that was unusual metallic fragments. I'm just thinking out loud. Now, Eric W. Davis, an astrophysicist who worked as a subcontractor and then as a consultant for the Pentagon UFO program since 2007, said that in some cases, examination of the materials had so far failed to determine their source and led him to conclude we couldn't make it ourselves. So here's somebody, he can't produce the materials, but he said he's seen the materials and we can't make it ourselves, which is as close as he's probably going to come to say is it's not from Earth. So the constraints on discussing classified programs have put officials who have studied UFOs in the position of stating their views without presenting any hard evidence. So, and Mr. Davis, who now works for Aerospace Corporation, has given classified briefings to a Defense Department agency as recently as March, about the time some of the coronavirus really kicked up here in the States, about retrievals from off-world vehicles not made on this Earth. And he said he's given classified briefings on retrievals of unexplained objects to staff members of the Senate Armed Services Committee in October 2019, and Senate Intelligence Committee a couple of days later. And here is another quote from Trump. Public fascination with the topic of UFOs has drawn in President Trump, who told his son Donald Trump Jr. in a June interview that he knew, quote unquote, very interesting things about Roswell, a city in New Mexico that is central to speculation about the existence of UFOs. The president demurred when asked if he would declassify any information on Roswell, saying, I'll have to think about that one. The previous quote, he said, yeah, they can believe whatever they want. I'm not quite convinced they're UFOs. And now here's saying, I know, quote unquote, very interesting things about Roswell. Take that for what you will. Oh man, to show you how quick this news is coming, I had already had this podcast recorded, edited, just about ready to go. And I see today, which is Friday, August 14th, there's yet another new news item about UFOs that's dropped out of the Pentagon. And this is from CNN. and it dropped last night at 10:31 p.m. The byline is Ryan Brown, and the headline is Pentagon to launch task force to investigate UFO sightings. Now, there's already been a lot of discussion in this podcast about the Pentagon and the Navy and et cetera. This is not a rehash of that. This is a brand new announced thing that has just happened. So this is out of Washington. It says the Pentagon is forming a new task force to investigate UFOs that have been observed by U.S. military aircraft, according to two defense officials. Deputy Secretary of Defense David Norquist will help oversee the task force, which is expected to be officially unveiled in the next few days. So previous efforts to look into what the Pentagon dubs unidentified aerial phenomena were led by the U.S. Navy, as many of the documented encounters involve their aircraft. So the DoD has not immediately responded to requests for comment, but this is not the program that we've already talked about that, it ended in 2017, but no, it was really just renamed and it's still funded. This is something even different. And like I said, it was just announced, I guess, the evening of Thursday, August 13th. So, it seems what's spurring this is the threat to military jets is what is spurring a lot of this. But the Senate Intelligence Committee, which we talked a little bit about already, voted in June to have the Pentagon and intelligence community provide a public analysis of the encounters. And again, it refers to these 3 short videos that keep coming up. So the main takeaway here is not only, we already had some sort of, DOD or military department that was going to brief Congress, the Senate Intelligence Committee every 6 months, but now they're saying they're forming yet a brand new organization or department or team or whatever that is going to investigate this stuff. I don't know if it's going to replace what's already there or be adjacent to it or what, but it's the Pentagon, it's the Department of Defense, it's the military, it's the federal government, U.S. federal government, once again acknowledging that they're taking unidentified aerial phenomena, which we would call UFOs, seriously. Like I said, that just broke. So this stuff is just coming fast and furious. Also, there's a little quote in here from President Trump. So this gives us 3 quotes in this podcast from President Trump. In April, he called footage of one of the Navy encounters a hell of a video and told Reuters that he wonders if it's real. So those are the 2 main things from that article. Again, we have, the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences mentioned. We have Luis Elizondo mentioned. So pay attention to the Tom Delange from Blink-182, previous lead singer. Pay attention to those names because this stuff keeps coming up over and over. Okay, that's it with a quick last-minute news edition to this podcast. And we have one more news item and then we will wrap up. Okay, and then finally, across the pond, Live Science reports that a British quote-unquote X-Files of UFO sightings is going public. This is by Mindy Weisberger, and this is from February. So the UK's Ministry of Defence will publish secret UFO reports for the first time. Now, it's interesting to note that they have been publishing stuff here and there in the National Archives, but what's about to happen here is they're going to have a dedicated gov.uk webpage that has new information that they haven't reported so far. So it says from the early 1950s until 2009, a department in the United Kingdom's Ministry of Defense, also known as the MOD, documented and investigated reports of UFOs. Now, more than a decade after the program ended, did they change the name and they still have it going like we did here in America? I don't know. Just thinking out loud. Now, more than a decade after the program ended, many of those former classified files about UFO sightings will be made available to the public for the first time. Previously, some MOD files about UFOs have been published online at the UK National Archives website. However, all of the agencies UFO reports will be released later this year, so supposedly in 2020, on that dedicated gov.uk webpage. And I don't know what the address of that's going to be yet. I did a little bit of searching around to look, and the only stuff I could find so far was on the National Archives. So it sounds like they haven't put that up yet. So you've got, in the United States, you got the agency that tracks and officially does the UFO stuff is supposedly going to be reporting to Congress every 6 months some of their findings. Didn't say all, but some. And now you have the British intelligence agency said, we're just going to put it all out there on this website. So yet again, another ding, 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 like I talked earlier. These are huge signals that the government is getting much more comfortable talking about UFOs, whatever they are, with the public. You know, the conventional wisdom is, which I've never agreed with, is that everybody will freak out. Well, people will freak out a little bit, but I think a lot of people won't. And like everything else that happens, you know, we eventually just absorb it into our daily culture and understanding and move on. Hopefully there's not some extraterrestrial threat or something, but just the knowledge of extraterrestrials, I don't think will freak people out that bad. Some, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's not like people that go ho-hum, but I don't think everyone will go into mass panic and blow up the world or anything. So the decision came after PA Media, a British news agency, filed a request for the UFO files under the Freedom of Information Act. MOD officials decided it would be better to publish these records rather than continue sending documents to the National Archives, the RAF spokesman said, Royal Air Force. The UK's fascination with UFOs spiked around 1950, prompting the MOD to form the Flying Saucer Working Party to address the phenomenon. UFOs in the early 1950s even captured the attention of Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who sent a memo to his air minister, which basically would be the head of the Air Force, basically, in 1952, asking, what does all this stuff about flying saucers amount to? What can it mean? What is the truth? So the Flying Saucer group discussed here, the Working Party, concluded the UFOs were hoaxes, delusions, or ordinary objects that were misidentified. Nevertheless, other MOD divisions continued the work of the official UFO investigation in the UK, ushering such efforts into the 21st century, the National Archives reported. The last UFO report to be published online by the MOD dates to 2009, covering sightings that took place from January through the end of November of that year. These include a silver disc-shaped light, reported in January 2009, up to 20 orange and red glowing lights, reported in June, a large bright silver-white ball sphere, reported in July, and 3 blazing gold orbs in a diagonal line in the sky. After MOD enacted a policy change in December 1, 2009, the agency no longer recorded or investigated sightings. But what they did find, including many recent UFO reports that were previously available only as hard copies, will be published online within the next few months. So they're like, we stopped in 2009, but everything that hasn't been published so far is coming. Nick Pope, a former UFO investigator for the MOD, said there should be some interesting nuggets in these new files. So there you go. And to wrap up the news here, the Bro Bible, here we go with the Bro Bible again, and the byline is Paul Saka. Apollo 11 astronaut Michael Collins reveals he believes there is alien life out there in space. And there's more to the article in this, but basically he was participating in a Q&A on Twitter, hashtag Ask Michael Collins, and this was one of the original astronauts that was on Apollo 11. He was the command module pilot when Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, but he was there. He was the command module pilot. And he did is hashtag Ask Michael Collins, where he answers questions about space from his science fans. The NASA astronaut was asked, do you believe in life outside of Earth? And the astronaut simply answered yes, but did not elaborate. There's also a story in there that to me is kind of a cheat from Buzz Aldrin, but you can go to the show notes at shaneplays.com and find this link and check it out for yourself. All right, that's going to be it for this episode of Shane Plays Geek Talk. Thanks so much for coming along for the ride. Look for the future for more Tribute to Art Bell and more UFO and strange news. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do a cryptid show before too long. But anyway, we'll finish as always with the bad joke of the week. Here we go. What did the astronaut cook in his skillet? Unidentified frying objects. Whoo-hoo. Yeah, that was so bad. So good. All right, we'll catch you next time on Shane Plays Geek Talk.
Dude, what's wrong, bro? There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west. The whole thing, dude.
take a ride?